Okay, thanks. Hi, everyone. So last night I gave one of the Ignite talks, and that was essentially doing 20 slides in 5 minutes with no control over them changing. So I'm going to try and change the pace here and do 30 minutes really covering what we're doing in the Data Lab in creating a national hub for data science across the country. So fundamentally, the Data Lab has been set up to drive economic and social benefit for Scotland by using data and exploiting data science techniques on that. And in order to do that, we're working across 3 communities. So the first one is industry, the second one is public sector, and the third one is academia. Now, the idea of the Data Lab came from the Scottish Government, and they view innovation as a key driver to growth in the country. So they have invested £120 million in 8 innovation centres around the country. So we have the Data Lab, which I'll cover. We've got Census, which looks at sensors and imaging systems. And for those 2, they are domain agnostic. We work across many domains, as you'll appreciate. And then we've got a number of domain-specific ones. So we've got digital health and social care, stratified medicine, industrial biotech, Scottish agriculture, oil and gas, and construction Scotland. So they're all funded for 5 years. They're roughly 2 to 3 years now in progress. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of overlap between us, especially in the data and the census space. So we do collaborate on projects and things that make sense to do together. So going back to the Data Lab, fundamentally there are 3 things that we focus on and we are funded to focus on. The first one is projects, or as we call it, collaborative innovation. So we will fund academic experts to work with industry and public sector on their challenges. We also have a skills portfolio looking both at courses and professional development. And we're also developing a community for data science across the country. So this presentation will really go under the skin of these 3 areas and describe the things that we've started up, how we're progressing, and what we've learned. So in order to do all of this, we have a team. So the team is 16 at the moment. We only anticipate growing to 20 in the current lifetime of the funding. And that team is primarily based in Edinburgh, out of Edinburgh University, which is our host. But we have nodes also in Aberdeen and Glasgow. And the reason for that is to allow us to work the entire country in terms of what we're doing. That team is a blend of expertise. So we have many people who have spent time in academia, and we have, like myself, people who have spent their careers in the industry as well. So trying to blend the mix up so that we can build the bridges across those communities and have a higher impact. Also, in terms of the team, we have 2 kind of distinct groups. We have a business development group, and their entire mission is to go out around the country, listen to the challenges of data science from an industry and public sector perspective, and also understand industry expertise and where we can match those together and do projects and skills. And we also have an operations team. And those guys look after the projects, make sure they're running correctly, and try to maximize success on them. We also have data scientists in that operations team, so we can deploy them into projects and get involved as well. So going into a bit more detail then on the projects or the collaborative innovation piece. So really, the team that I showed only kind of got up to speed in August of last year, working at capacity. And since that time, we have funded 20 projects. So this diagram is basically a summary where we see the size of the circles represents the number of projects in that area and the density, the amount of funding that we've put into that area. So we're well spread across many different areas. So we started doing stuff in agriculture, cyber, legal and health, a bit more in food and drink and urban city stuff. But primarily a lot of the focus so far has been in energy, so oil and gas and also utilities, and digital product. And what I mean by digital product is using data and data science to enhance existing functionality in digital e-commerce products, or indeed using data and data science to create new products. So that's kind of really a summary of the last 6 to 9 months of where we are, and we can imagine that that picture will change dynamically as we move into other areas. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of projects that we've been funding. The first one is an example from energy. So we're working with Aggreko, and they are a global provider of temporary energy solutions. So they have 10,000 generators around the world in different locations, and they've got streaming data coming out of those generators. And they're interested in understanding how that data can be used in predictive maintenance. So how can they tell when a generator might have an issue before it actually does? So we've partnered them with the University of Strathclyde, who have expertise in electrical engineering, so domain-specific stuff, and also computing and informatics. And they are working on machine learning and predictive techniques to apply that into Agreco. Now that project operates in the prototype space and has been very successful. So what they're now looking to do in terms of the Agreco business is take that in-house, create production within their environment, and grow a data science team around managing this and doing other things within their organisation. So the second example is with a startup in Glasgow, one called Amicus, and they are looking to disrupt law. So what they're doing is looking at historical Scottish case law, and on the basis of that, trying to predict what outcome might happen for a new case. So they're partnering with Strathclyde again. We do work with other universities, but this is an example, an interesting example here, where we're actually funding the professor in law to help in this project, as well as the informatician. So again, it's the notion of combining the domain experience with the data science experience with the industry partner to deliver value. So in this project, we are using natural language processing techniques over the corpus of that specific case law in order to try and predict the outcome of cases. That project's just finished and it's been successful, and they're looking to grow that in their product. So thirdly, an example of some things that are just about tipping point to go live in terms of projects in health and social care. So for us as an area, this has been challenging in terms of getting projects up and running. There's a lot more effort required in this area to build the relationships between organisations to, one, want to do a project, and two, to actually bring the data sets together. So there's a few things that we're getting involved in with the partners that you see below. One is on delayed discharge. So the Scottish Government estimate that that costs them £125 million a year. So we're looking at when patients first come into hospital, what's their likelihood of turning into a delayed discharge case? As they move through the hospital system, how does that change? And how could preventative measures be taken so that that is not the outcome? We're also looking at mental health and well-being, and for people who have or experiencing that, their employability and how we can improve that. We're also looking at synthetic data. So that's the notion of taking healthcare data but extracting it such that you have the patterns in your data set, but you don't actually have individual users or patients. And we're also started a project now on European safe havens. So very similar to the notion that the Intel guy spoke about in the keynotes. And here it's really a federated system of healthcare across Europe and running experiments across that. So if it wasn't difficult enough to pull individual data for a country together, we're actually trying to do that across Europe. We're partnering with a consortium in EIT Digital to do that. So that gives you a kind of flavour of projects we're involved in. In terms of kind of experiments in this space and what we're learning, we only really started doing this from August last year. So one of the key things we started to do was, let's do an open call and see what the interest is. And what we found was we had 50 applications for funding for projects, and we only funded 2. So that's not a very successful hit rate. So what we did was to recruit that business development team to really understand what was happening in the country, what's happening in academia, what are the problems the industry and public sector face, and what are the good matches for the funding that we have available, and what are the projects that we should fund. So off of the basis of growing that team together, we then did another open call, specifically in finance, and that then allowed us to generate a bunch of leads for that team and start creating new projects, which has been great. The other element is how much do we fund? So we were really set up to fund projects up to the scale of 100K worth of academic time, and we expect industry partners to match that in cash or in kind. But that's kind of evolved on the basis of the types of projects and discussions that we've been having. So now any project from 20 to 100K requires a full proposal, and we have an industry advisory board who review those final proposals to ensure that they are to the right level of innovation we're looking at as an innovation centre. They involve the right amount of data science, and that the team delivering them have the ability to deliver them. So that board comprises of venture capitalists, leading data science academics in Scotland and also leading analytical leaders in Scotland as well. But also we started to find that there was a need for smaller amounts of funding to experiment. So we fund projects less than 20k, really to take some data, take a concept, apply initial techniques to it, and see if there's the kernel of a good scalable project in there. And that's something we've just started doing in the last couple of months, and it's actually a really successful way of engaging with many companies in that area. So moving on from the project side onto skills and talent. So I think, as most of us are aware, this is a global challenge in terms of what we do in terms of skills and talent around the world in this space. So we've been developing over the last few months a portfolio of different types of courses and different professional development programs. So I'm going to talk in a bit more detail about MSCs, NGDs and CPD type stuff, because we've got those live, but we're also currently at the moment speccing executive training. So big data in the boardroom, how do you talk about data assets and data strategy at boardroom level? And we're partnering with a Directors Institute in Scotland to get that off the ground this year. And also MOOCs. So there's lots of online stuff out there. There's no point in recreating that. But actually what we find is there is an interesting requirement for doing that in specific domain application spaces. So such as specific areas of finance or specific areas of energy. So we're looking to partner with companies and academics to get those off the ground. So I'll talk about some of the education stuff in a bit more detail. So last month we launched our NGD with the University of St Andrews. It's an NGD in computer science, but we're focused on the data-intensive applications of computing science. And the notion of an NGD really is that it's applied research. So the award of an NGD is to the level of a PhD, but the structure of it is slightly different. So 25% of the research engineer's time is spent in the university learning stuff. So it's statistics, it's data mining, it's data science. It might involve other faculties folding in domain expertise. 75% of that research engineer's time is on the industry side. So applying research and evolving that with the industry partner. We've had a lot of demand since we launched that. It's been very successful. And I think one of the key things is, coming from industry and the feedback that we've had is, doing a 3-year research project for us is not really keeping pace with what we need as a business. So as part of that, what we've decided to do at St Andrews is offer the ability to do a research engineer portfolio. So they do 4 to 6 research projects in the lifetime of their degree. Those are tuned to what the industry partner needs, but also must meet the kind of research level quality of that degree. And from the Data Lab perspective, we fund half of that program, and we expect industry or public sector partners to match the other half. So really, this is an interesting entry point for bringing on talent into a company. So our ask really, in effect, what it comes down to is the industry partner needs to fund 11k a year for a research resource into their organisation. So that kicks off in September, and we've seen a lot of demand for that. Moving on, though, to professional development. So we're doing a lot of stuff with universities, but there's also a need in organisations for the key assets of people who know the business, but perhaps they are using older technologies, and they want to step up from doing standard statistics or other things into more of the kind of broader data science. So in September, we've launched our first professional development bootcamp. We're doing that with the Data Incubator. So they're based in New York, and they work with the likes of Etsy, Capital One, and LinkedIn to train their data scientists. And they're going to run a 3-week intensive data science bootcamp in Edinburgh. So that's going to look at introduction to data science, it's going to look at machine learning, and it's going to look at data visualization and communication. So that has really been designed to be practical exercises and intensive practical exercises over 3 weeks to transform the people that join from the start. So we're very excited to launch that. And the last piece, if I go back one, is on MSCs. And this very much is an experiment in scale for us. So this year we had funding for 40 MSc students in data science across 3 universities. And rather than just give the cash to those students and they get it for free, which is great, what we want to do is encourage them to stay in the country and learn more from working with industry and public sector partners. So we put on a series of events for those students during the course of the year, events like hackathons, like soft skills stuff, entrepreneur skills, all that kind of stuff, to introduce them to different elements of business and public sector and what they're doing. So an interesting thing, an anecdote from that was the head of innovation from Sports Scotland came to us, and they were trying to recruit data people, and he sent me the CV, and it was 6 pages long. It was 6 pages of incomprehensible public sector description of a job that nobody would be interested in, and I kind of fed that back to him. But I said, you know, what you guys are doing is really interesting. When I talk to you, you paint a really interesting picture that data people are going to be interested in. So we brought him along to speak to the students, and he did a great presentation. He's been on the One Show and on telly talking about this, you know, all about golf and swimming and all that kind of stuff. And at the end of that, he had a queue of students that wanted to work with him. So it's that kind of personal linkage between what the students are doing and what businesses are actually doing that's really beneficial. So on the success of that, we are going to scale that program. So starting in September, we're going to more than double the sponsorship of students. So we'll have 90 students across 7 universities in Scotland. And taking it to that scale then presents us with some interesting possibilities in what we do with that cohort. It also presents an interesting thing to look at. Yes, we're generating quantity now, which is great, but what's the quality like? How do we ensure quality across that? And then the third experiment in scale was really an event. So in Scotland just now, there are 16 data science MSc courses running across 12 universities. So there's a lot of stuff happening. Our mission is to work across the country. So the question that we had is, well, if we're sponsoring 40 just now, how do we get the rest involved? We can't give them cash, but what we can do is bring them together in an event. So we came up in January with the concept of a collider event. So let's bring all those students together. We'll fund them to come to Edinburgh. Let's bring industry and public sector partners who are interested in employing them together. And let's bring the course directors together. So we called it a collider event, Data Talent Scotland. And the idea really was to stimulate employment, but also linkages between industry and the academic leaders to help promote how those courses evolve and make sure that they're matched to the needs of industry. We also allowed others who are interested in developing data science careers who weren't maybe studying at the moment to come and speak to universities to sign up for online courses and all that kind of stuff. So we had 500 in that event. It took us from concept to event 7 weeks to pull it all together. Pretty rushed, but it was really good success and lots of anecdotes of actual employment coming from the back of that. So we're going to do something on a completely different scale next year, which we'll talk about shortly. So that gives you a flavour of the type of stuff that we are doing in skills and talent. The third area is on community building. And we believe this is really the fabric which will drive the success of what we're doing. So building a community for data science across the country. So we're doing 3 core things in that area at the moment. One is we run meetups, largely in Edinburgh just now. So they range from technical style to high-level business benefits from running data science. And we regularly pack that out, which is great. We also do senior level engagements. So we had our first CXO Away Day back in Q2, where we brought 20 leading CXO from around Scotland to get together to discuss their applications of data, what they can learn from each other, but also for us to listen to them and understand what their challenges are, and in the context of what we're doing, how we could help them moving forward. And we're about to run our second one of those in November. And then thirdly, we've experimented with international trips. So we've taken cohorts of businesses and public organisations to conferences around the world to understand and learn what's going on, but also build their international networks for their businesses. So for example, we went to StrataHadoop in San Jose in Q1 with a group. And out of that, what we've seen is some of the startups, for example, have engaged with the guys out in Silicon Valley and purchased some products and are going to work with them. But also an interesting thing with having 10 businesses from Scotland together is they're forming very strong networks themselves. And we've seen lots of business B2B type activity happening there. So out of all the kind of community building, I guess one of the things that's been striking us, that's emerging, is this network for data science across the country. And we've been mapping that internally in the kind of CRM tools we've been building, all the introductions we're doing, we've been understanding how that evolves. So there's been some key things that have been kind of emerging from that network. A couple of ones, obvious ones, so there has been jobs created as creating that network as a result of doing that. New business opportunities, all that's great stuff, and is really geared to our mission of driving economic benefit. But actually, it's a really good sounding board for us as well as an organisation. So a lot of good feedback in terms of what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing going forward. So some examples is on our meetup footprint. It's like, why are you doing stuff in Edinburgh all the time? Come up to Aberdeen, come across to Glasgow. So we ran our first meetup in Aberdeen 3 weeks ago. It was full to capacity, which is fantastic. We're running our first one in Glasgow tonight. Again, that's full to capacity. Over 100 people coming to that. So it really shows that there's an appetite around the entire country for doing this, which is fantastic for our point of view because that's what we want to catalyse. We've also had some feedback from the data scientists saying, you know, you're going too high level at the moment in these meetups. It's good to hear business use cases, but hearing that every month is getting a bit repetitive. So let's do some deep technical stuff. So we're going to launch under the hood sessions, probably run them at the lunchtime, broadcast them around the country, where we get into deep technical architecture, implementation, all that kind of stuff. And then finally, from one of our international trips and a few beers, what came out of that was we were talking about the development of our own careers, our own experiences. And actually, there's an opportunity to help early career data scientists, maybe graduates of the first couple of years, and pair them up with people who have more experience and do some mentoring. So we're going to run an experiment in the next few months where we take a small group of mentors and mentees and see how that goes. If it starts to work, then we'll start to scale that across the country. So that network has really been key to us and will be key to us going forward. So the last thing in community building really is to announce that the higher scale thing that we're doing beyond Data Talent Scotland, going a little bit crazy, is next year we'll be running a data festival in Edinburgh and around the country. So Edinburgh's always famed for the festival in August. We're going to do one in the dead of winter in March, which should be great. But this really will be an international festival. So we'll have the Data Talent Scotland event, but we'll have a 2-day international festival with international speakers and attendees talking about various themes around data science. We'll also fold in events around the country. So we'll have hackathons and presenters in Glasgow and Aberdeen and Inverness, Dundee, etc. And there'll be bunches of different activities like drinking, all that kind of stuff, maybe some data art, and things like that as well. So at the moment, we've just assembled a cross-industry board to do that, and we'll be planning and launching that. But the site is now live, so if you're interested in finding out more, please register there. So to end now, so a little bit about the future and what we're looking to do, what we've learned. So in doing this presentation, I started to think about, well, what is our engagement with universities like? So across the 3 areas I've talked about, projects, education, community, who are we working with, who are we not working with, and what does that look like? So in terms of spread and what we've achieved in the last 9 months, I'm pretty happy with what we've done. We've got more to do. There are a lot of blanks there, and we can expand our footprint in those universities. But a really interesting thing going back to the case studies I talked about was the model of engagement with universities. So it's not just the computing or informatics department. It's the subject matter experts as well that are critical to success in projects and much of what we do. So I talked about the engagement with the law department. There's also ones that we're engaging with in geoscience and healthcare domains as well. So I think in terms of footprint of what we do in universities, we'll be working across interdisciplinary departments in order to grow our activity here. So in terms of feedback that we've been receiving from people that we've been working with, it's been really positive. Now, we don't take that for granted, but what it is useful for are signals in terms of how we are performing and what we're doing. We like constructive criticism as well in order to evolve what we're doing. But some of the emerging things that are coming out of this is the notion of partnership. So a couple of examples of partnership in small and large scale. So we've been working with some startups, and one in particular that wanted to come to Scotland, didn't know how to land and expand. They had an office booked, but it fell through, so we put them up in our office for a couple of weeks to get started. We gave them introductions to the technical community that they need to grow their business. We gave them introductions to the potential customers in Scotland for their domain, and we started to sponsor a couple of projects with them as well. So that got us thinking about actually there could be packages of support that we can offer companies either coming to the country or starting in the country to support them in their growth path, and also do that working with other agencies within the country. The other example is large organisations that we're working with. And what we're finding initially is they'll pick a project to do, they'll pick maybe one or two MSc students to do a placement with, but actually what they want is more. So they want to invest in 5 projects to help their organisation. They want 6 or 7 students. They want a couple of NSD students. They want to sponsor events. So we're looking going forward in the next few months to scale that activity and actually partner with large companies to do that. So to finish off, just some learnings from the last few months in terms of setting up, and what we have kind of learned are key to successes in this area. So the first one is the bridge. So for us, we really bridge academia into industry, into public sector. That is not an easy thing to do. And actually, the majority of the time that we've spent in our activities is dedicated to that before you even get to the data or the data science. It's fundamentally critical because you're not going to get to the data without building those relationships and doing this stuff. So we continually need to invest our time into doing that, but also think about how we can make it more efficient. The second point is quality and quantity. So I touched on it earlier on in the education piece. So if we're scaling the number of students coming out of universities doing this stuff, how do we ensure that the quality is there and they can work in industry or go on to further research practices? And for that, as an organisation, I don't really want to micromanage that. I don't want to be going through universities and checking courses and checking students, but I'd rather encourage the ecosystem to come together to do that. So encourage the strong partnerships between industry and academia to look at the courses, evaluate how they should evolve, and give feedback and help and work with the students. The third part is data innovation. So in the context of your organisation, what is data innovation? We've had a lot of internal discussions about that in our context. So we've got some clear guidelines being funded by the government and working as an innovation centre in what we can and cannot fund. So for example, standard BI implementations and analysis and data integration is not what we do. It's really taking what's coming out of the research areas and trying to apply that into industry. But as we've grown the team, a lot of the team aren't data scientists. The business development people know how to sell stuff. They know a bit about data, but they don't know deep data science stuff. So we've been doing a lot of internal training in what a good data science project looks like from our perspective in terms of what we want to fund. And that's a question in terms of both industry as well to ask yourselves is what is data innovation in your space? And then finally, the network. So as I described earlier on, I think one of the fundamental things we've learned is building that network and fostering that network is a key thing to drive the success of what we're doing. We need to listen to what's coming out of that. We need to grow and nurture it. And if we do that, it will be a key component to our success going forward. So that's a quick whirl through with what we're doing in the Data Lab in Scotland. Hopefully that's been interesting. There's some channels you can connect to us on here. But I think we've probably got some time for questions if anybody has any specific questions on that. Thanks.
So we have about 10 minutes for questions.
I saw that you're dealing with health.
Yep.
What about health? As some priority.
So the question is we're dealing with health. What are we doing in terms of health education? So health education and data science. So I didn't have it up there, but one of the universities has developed a number of detailed programs in health data science. So Edinburgh University, through the FAR Institute, which operates across the UK, run a number of MSCs specifically in health informatics and data science. And that's one of the 16, in terms of the 16 portfolio in the country that's live at the moment. And they do also kind of professional development for RAs working in the health space at the moment. So there might be, we're in discussions with them in terms of can we develop MOOCs in that area as well and expand that globally. But they also have an online course that they've developed, that they've just launched as well. So in terms of health in Scotland, Edinburgh and the FAR Institute is really the place that's doing it at the moment.
I'm thinking about your funding over the next 2 to 5 years and how you're going to ensure that you get ongoing commitment from government and some of your industry sponsors.
Yeah.
How do you communicate, or do you have agreed success criteria, and how do you communicate the results and success of your project?
Yeah, so the question is, how do we measure ourselves essentially, and how do we look at the sustainability piece? So we're funded for 5 years, so at the moment that's to 2019. We're starting to put sustainability plans in place. And we do have specific measures from the Scottish Government, Scottish Funding Council, on what they view success looking like. So that, if you want to know the numbers, is around 250 new high-value jobs to Scotland. I want to be bullish and say we can knock that out of the park, especially with the types of events that we're doing. And adding 105 million gross value add to the Scottish economy. So in order to do that kind of lag metric, if you like, we've got a bunch of lead metrics to help drive that. So when we're looking at projects that come in, one of the searching questions that we ask the people proposing the project is, what value is it going to deliver to the country? And that group, that panel I talked about, VCs and industry experts, grill them when they come in to make sure, as much as we can at that proposal stage, that that's going to have a significant contribution to the business and to the economy. Sorry? That, well, we've got an approach to measuring it. I have to admit it's a difficult thing to measure, but we've got an approach that we've agreed with our funders is the right way to do it at the moment. And we're challenged with social KPIs and all that kind of stuff, but nobody specified what a social KPI actually looks like. I'm less worried about social KPIs and more interested about social impact. So if we can improve delayed discharge in the NHS, for example, if we can improve mental health services, etc., then that's a good value statement and piece to convey rather than trying to cram it into a KPI graph. And the sustainability piece we're looking at just now in terms of, I think we will be funded post 5 years, but it might not be 100%. So we need to look at options and what we can grow here that will generate some revenue. And we've got some ideas about that. But we also have the limitation in terms of working in the government that you can't displace other activity that might be happening in the country. So we can't compete with companies in Scotland doing stuff. So it's an interesting balance that we need to figure out. And it's not an easy one, I don't think, to be honest. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, where do you find graduates are going to after they've completed these courses and these studies?
So the question is, where do we find students are going to after they've completed the studies? So we're in the kind of first experiment just now. So that first 40 cohort, we have facilitated the placements for them for their credit-bearing courses. So I think we've placed about 25 students into industry. We are looking where they go basically after that. I think we ran a survey for that Data Talent Scotland piece to understand what the students were looking for in their first job. And it was interesting because, and they might just be naive on this, but the last thing they were looking for was salary. The first thing they were looking for was an interesting challenge to learn from in terms of data and data science. And so at that event, we were going around all the companies saying, you know, actually what you should be pitching is, why is your business interesting for these people to work on? And, you know, the startups worrying about competing with the larger companies. And I was speaking to them and saying, well, you've got an interesting concept here. You need to apply certain data science techniques. That's what you need to convey to that group to get their interest initially. So I think come probably September time, we'll have more data on that. And certainly for us, very interested in how many stay in Scotland, how many leave. And actually, if people leave, that's a good thing, because as long as they've had a good experience in terms of working and educating in Scotland, and they spread the word wherever they go, they might come back or they might refer people later, that's fine. That's the way we work in the kind of global economy. Yeah.
You don't sound like you're wedded to any particular technologies to generally. How do the technology kind of choices get steered when you're working with these organisations?
to be honest, a lot of the technologies that organizations we're working with, they are kind of not very mature at the moment, is what we've been finding. A lot of them haven't started to use Hadoop or anything like that, which is interesting. And I think what we've identified is that's probably a gap in a lot of businesses that we've been speaking to. So to address the thinking around there and the benefits and why you should do it, what we're looking to do is organise sessions on architectures, different flavours of architectures and implementations, advantages of using them, disadvantages of using as well. Because I think there's definitely for us, what we've been finding is there's definitely an opportunity to help educate businesses in the opportunities of using different technologies. Certainly what we find with a lot of startups is it's straight to AWS. The tech talk that we did last week, it was a technical talk. It was talking about Docker, Spark, and Bluemix all together. And the guy was in a hackathon and he'd done some stuff with weather data. He said, actually, this was all good, but I'm going to go do it in AWS anyway because it's a bit better than Bluemix, etc. So certainly in startup land, I think a lot of people are going straight to AWS. And it's an interesting space, I think, to explore and kind of evangelize across the community in terms of different architectures and technical stuff.
We have time for one more question. The rest
Nope.
is another question.
Okay.
We'll thank our speaker again.
Thank you.